Good afternoon again, everyone. This is Lisa with Phone Pro. Welcome to the webinar. We're going to get started, and it's all about ensuring quality customer service on every call. It looks like a variety of you have taken advantage of reading through our lobby, as we call it, and all the notes that we have on the left side, and we see a variety of people that are responding to the polls on the right side. I'll go ahead and broadcast out the results so far on these. And if you haven't voted yet with the polls, please do. That would be fantastic. So let's take a peek at this. Our first poll says, as a customer, when's the last time you experienced great customer service? I am so excited to see one person said yesterday because I've yet to see that. So I'm thrilled that we have one person that says yesterday. The majority of us, it's been about a week ago. And then we can also see that there are quite a few of us that it's been over a week ago. So let's keep that in mind and we'll venture into the next poll here. The next poll is talking about your organization and what your current habits are in order to ensure quality service. And we can see here that we have almost half of us, or actually over half of us, that are actually monitoring and recording those calls. Fantastic. Make sure that we celebrate all the successes that we are doing. So keep those things in mind, those two polls and the results. And what we'll do is we'll pop on into the actual webinar itself. So your screen is now changing. And I'll get our camera started. There we go. Good afternoon, everyone. It's me, live and in person, coming to you from Indianapolis, Indiana. And it's all about ensuring quality service today. So we have a lot that we're going to cover in 30 minutes. So take notes, and you can see that we have a chat window that is open for you. And I'll start the first chat with a big hello to everyone. So if you would like to send us a question, feel free to do that. If you would like to add to the conversation, absolutely fantastic. We'll keep monitoring that chat window and we'll look for questions. So, one of the things I want to talk about first is ensuring quality on every call. Something that it begins with is remembering that every call has two sides to it, two sides. And let me type out what those are because this is the first note for you to take. You want to make sure to serve yourself well and take notes. The first side of a call is the technical side. This is the side that's completely unique to your organization. The processes, the procedures, the computer system, that's all that technical side. Now, the other side is, and let me type this in, non-technical. Okay, that seems kind of silly, but let's stop and think about what that actually means. The non-technical side of calls, that's all about customer service. That's how you show up in the call. I can do the computer system, but how do I do it so it comes across great for the customer? So that non-technical side is something that weighs incredibly heavily in every interaction. As a matter of fact, there are some studies that are out from Stanford University, Carnegie Foundation, and they talk about the weight that non-technical plays in any interaction. The non-technical is weighted so heavily that someone can come up with the right answer and tell you technically what to do, and yet it can be received poorly because of how it's said. So technical and non-technical, keep those in mind as we venture on in through the rest of the webinar. So let's pop on over to the next slide. What we have here, 9 out of 10 consumers said that they place service over brand and price. So let's stop and think about the poll that you just took. Many of us said that it's been at least a week since I've had great customer service. So how many of you out there, and think about this, how many of you do customer satisfaction surveys? And if you do, stop and think about the ratings that you use. Are your ratings good, fair, excellent, poor, whatever they are? What typically happens is that when we get a good rating, not excellent, but good, we feel pretty secure that our consumers, our customers are going to be loyal to us. And what research has shown us is it's actually good's not good enough. We actually have to excel. So when we stop and think about our personal experiences as customers, in that first poll that you took and you said, wow, it's been at least a week since I've had great customer service. Well, that's pretty sad. No one's doing something to help you actually stay a loyal customer and even an advocate. So 9 out of 10 say, hey, that service is really, really important. So remember how we're defining service. That's that non-technical side. How do I show up in the call? How do I show up in the interaction? So as we move on through this, Couple things I want to make sure that you have your radar up and turned on. These are some things that you saw in the promotions we did for this webinar. So let's talk about these for just a minute. What we'd like for you to really listen for and internalize are these three things. First off, evaluate your current quality processes. One of the things, we're going to be talking about a variety of best practices. And one of the things we've already talked about is technical and non-technical, that those things actually have a place in the way that you monitor and the way that you actually look at quality in every call. So think about that. Does technical and non-technical, do they have a place in your organization? Do you actually think about both of those? That's one of the best practices. And as we go through the rest of the best practices regarding quality, stop and think about your current processes. How well do you do them? Does it have a place in your organization? So that's the first thing to be tuned into. The second thing, recognize meaningful customer service strategies versus those that miss the mark. There are a variety of things that we hear as we travel throughout the country that customer service representatives are saying, and it's missing the mark, even though unintentionally. They feel that they're doing something to promote rapport. They feel that they're doing something to connect with the customer, and actually, it doesn't make a difference. It actually can turn it towards a negative experience. We'll talk about what some of those are. So think about those and do those show up in your organization? And then the third thing, and this is huge, who owns and indisputably influences great customer service in your organization? There are a couple of players, and we'll talk about those too. So those are things for you to really listen for as we're going through this webinar and think about your organization. So the first thing for us to really dive deep into, what does great customer service look like and sound like? What does great customer service look like and sound like? So what I'd like for you to do right now, jump into the chat window there, and I would love to see all sorts of answers from you. Go ahead and type in, what is great customer service? How do you define it? When you thought about that great customer service experience that you had, someone had one yesterday, someone had one a couple weeks ago, someone had one a week ago. Think about what made it great and go ahead and type that into the chat window and let's see what comes up as great customer service. I see a variety of people are typing. That's fantastic. Accuracy, great, Mark. Thank you very much. Knowledgeable, absolutely, Christy. Making customers feel comfortable. Yes, so they're more cooperative with you. Nice, Carrie. That they sound happy to help. They're friendly, personable. This is fantastic. No holding, Tanya. That's so fun. Absolutely. Oh, I love that. MMFI. Okay, we're borrowing that one, Tim. Make me feel important. So that's fantastic. What else? Empathy. A smile. Fantastic. Keep going. This is great. They listen. They're patient. Ooh, listening is good, isn't it? It's hard too. Assumptions creep in there. Very good. This is a fantastic list. So in the notes that you're taking, think about what we're sharing in the webinar. And also, there's a lot of great information out there from your colleagues that are here on the webinar with us. So take notes of some of the things that they're saying too. So let's talk about standards for just a second. When it comes to standards, you can see that there's a word here that says objective. Something that we see a lot of times when we say, hey, what standards do you have in place right now for customer service? We'll see words such as professional, nice, friendly, and to us, that's a great start. It's a great start, but objectively, it's not really there. You need to really stop and think, is it done or not done? And that's a key point. Can I see them or hear them doing it or not? Either done or not done. Did they do it? Yes or no? That's when you get it objectively. So what standards need to do is they need to tell you, should it happen? Should it not happen? And on every call, every customer interaction, you never want to say, well, on these calls we'll do this and on those calls we'll do that, because then you're making it harder on your representatives. So stop and think about this. When it comes to standards, one of the examples is your greeting. There are a variety of organizations that we've worked in where their greeting, they have a greeting, but it's not something that is purposeful. And that's what's really key, that on purpose, this is what we're doing for our greeting. When you stop to think about the importance of a greeting too, the greeting is your lobby. That's your lobby to that call, to from that caller to your organization, that's the lobby. How great is your lobby when with your greeting? And when you stop and think about real lobbies that we have out in our organizations, think about how beautiful some of those lobbies are, and the amount of focus that we put on that, and the amount of resources and energy we put on developing this amazing lobby in our buildings. And then stop and think about, how do most of our customers interact with us? Do they call us? Well, our greetings are lobby. So how do we make sure that our greeting really is something that welcomes them? And that's one of the big things with a greeting, is that they want to feel welcomed. They want to know where they've reached, and they want to know who they've reached. And that's it. So those are very concrete, objective things regarding greeting. And your standards need to be just like that, where it's either done or not done. Yes, they did it, or no, they did not. So let's dive in a little bit more regarding standards. So here are those words: professional and friendly. Go ahead and type into the chat window, if you would please. What does professional look like? What does professional look like? Let's get some ideas going here in the chat window. If you say, boy, they were professional. Well, what made them professional? Got a few people typing away. Perfect. Polite, accurate, good grammar, polished, great tone. Tone is huge. Oh, that's huge. You hit on a big one, Alicia. Fantastic. And then we also have friendly. Now, friendly, we can talk about the exact same things. Now, does friendly, oh, there we go. With eye contact is a big one, especially with friendly. And when you're on the phone, you've got verbal eye contact that you need to make sure that happens. So let's look a little bit differently at the words professional and friendly, because remember, we're talking about standards. These are those things you want to make sure you do not compromise at your organization in order to ensure quality at every call. So let's look at this a little bit differently. When it comes to professional, when it comes to friendly, what's really key is to think about, how do we make this happen? So as we start drilling down into how, here are some things that have come from some research that customers want. Customers want to feel valued. They want to feel that there's a desire to meet their needs. They want to feel that the employees are courteous to them. They want to feel that the knowledge that's being shared with them is relevant, is something that actually is personalized to them. And they want to make sure that the employees are confident, are comfortable in their knowledge. So as we talk about standards, what you want to do is take this and drill this down into how. So for example, when you demonstrate a desire to meet my needs. So we're talking about my needs, the caller's needs, the customer's needs. How is it that your representatives on the phone actually do that? How do they make sure that they're connecting with each individual person that's on the phone? Do they use empathy in the right time? Does their greeting focus them, or do they sound like just a robot answering the phone call time and time again the exact same way? So how does the greeting play into making that customer feel valued right from the start? There are a variety of questions to ask, and then you go, well, how can we do that? Courteous. All right, courteous. Please, thank you, you're welcome. Those are words that have a very big place in having great quality customer service on the phone. Now, here's something that's interesting: relevant and personal, and also knowledgeable. There are a variety of times that we'll go to an organization, we'll monitor some calls and listen to how things are going. And what happens is that it's clear, completely clear, that the representatives are very knowledgeable. And what happens, though, is that they take that knowledge a little too far, and it goes beyond what's relevant for that particular call. For example, we're working with an organization, and the group that we're listening to were trained, they had just come out of training. And so they were literally blurting all sorts of great information onto the caller, but the caller didn't need to be, so to speak, trained to do the job. They just needed the information that they needed. So how does that knowledge come through? Does that knowledge come through as relevant for the customer, or is the knowledge just really way too much? So when you're setting standards, that's one of the key best practices. These are the expectations. What are those objective things? How do we drill this down into, how does that look for our organization? And right now, think about also, how does it look right now for your organization? All right, let's pop on over to the next area. Now, remember we talked about who owns and is indisputably influencing the quality in your calls? I'm going to say leaders, and that's not going to be a surprise to you. You have the representatives on the phone, and you have the management team, the leadership team. They're the ones that are the people that are encouraging and supporting, and this is really key. Wherever the management team focuses is where the representatives will focus. And what you as leaders actually inspect, they will respect. So those are really key points. Where you focus, they will focus. What you inspect, they'll respect. So that's why we talk about coaching and monitoring. And it looked like over half of the people on the webinar actually have a monitoring program. Fantastic. That is wonderful. What we're going to do is we're going to talk about two different sides of giving feedback to the representative. We have coaching here and we have monitoring. Now let's drill this down a little bit. And you can see here that we're not talking about doing one or the other, not choosing one or the other, but actually the best practice, the perfect world is to actually do it both, do both of them, coaching and monitoring. Now I'm going to drill down into some details here. And I want you all to take a nice deep breath because one of the first thoughts that usually pop into people's minds are, Lisa, how are we going to do all of that and everything else we have to do? So I'm going to go through perfect world scenario, and then we're going to talk about how do we modify that to help make it fit. So here's perfect world with coaching. So coaching is defined as side by side. You're literally sitting with that representative, you're plugged into their phone, you're listening to both sides of the conversation. And you've got your standards there in front of you and you're taking notes. Did they do the greeting the way that you want the greeting? Did they close the call? How did they put them on hold? Did they cover the technical information accurately? You're looking at all of that. So it's side by side with the representative. And then after the call, you have them go into unavailable and you ask them. And that's what coaching is. It's a conversation. Now, here's something that might be a little hard for some of us. Some of us are more natural tellers than askers. And with coaching, it's a conversation. And you always want to seek first to understand, then be understood. That's one of Stephen Covey's 7 habits. And I'm sure that rings true. And a lot of you are familiar with those 7 habits. So seek first to understand, then be understood. So coaching always starts with a question. How did you think that call went? How did that, what are some things that you did well on that call? What are some things you would change in that call? And it goes from there. So seek first to understand. So it's side by side. The purpose of coaching is for self-development. Now, self-development is all about self-discovery. When I can actually be engaged in a conversation and really discover for myself what I think I did well and some things that I need to improve, well, that's when I get real buy-in. And overwhelmingly, whenever we work with leadership teams on coaching, that's the number one thing they say. Wow, when we use this, there's so much buy-in with the representatives. So buy-in is an enormous part of coaching. So purpose, self-development. Now let's continue on the coaching side of it. Now, the place that standards have in coaching is not only are they practiced as you're listening on the phone call, but also after you have that the phone call hangs up and once you're having that conversation with them, then you can see if those standards are actually understood. Let's say that they missed one of the standards and you ask them, hey, I didn't hear XYZ, whatever the standard might be. Can you tell me more about that? And then find out if they say, oh, I never thought about it, or I'm not sure what it actually means. I don't know how to do it. I don't know how to make that show up in the call. So you can hear when you're coaching, when you're listening to the call, if it's practiced, and then have a great conversation on, is it even understood? Because if it's not understood, it's hard to practice it. All right, now here's the part where you take a deep breath because I'm going to talk about perfect world. How often do you do this? Duration. You can see here number of calls or amount of time. So you're asking, Lisa, how long do I sit with them? How long do I stay with them and engage with them in this coaching conversation? Well, perfect world, what we would encourage you to do is to have a sampling of calls. You really want to have at least 3 calls in order to really be able to have look for a trend. So if you can do 3 calls or 30 minutes because you want to make sure that you realize they need to get back on the phone. You have other things you need to do. So if you can have at least 3 calls in the 30 minutes and do feedback on that through the coaching process, fantastic. You've got trends identified. And how often do you do that? Every 2 weeks. Again, that's perfect world. So let's stop and think about what this means. So in a month, you're sitting with them twice and you're going to be coaching on 6 calls if 6 calls come in at that time. Some call centers don't have calls coming in one right after the other. So now what you need to do is you need to make this into your world. Think about everything that you've got going on. Think about the coaching that you want to make sure that you provide for your representatives, and how often do you want to do it. So let's leave that for just a second. Let's pop over to the other side because here we have monitoring. Now, monitoring is different than coaching because monitoring are the recorded calls, as you saw on the poll, and we have more than half of you out there recording the calls, which is fantastic. So what do you do with it? This is the question to ask yourself. Many of you, my fingers are crossed, do feedback using monitored calls. Fantastic. There are a variety of ways that you can do that. Now, the purpose of monitoring is for quality control. Are they, and you can see here underneath standards, are they practicing the standards that we've put into place? Are they actually being true and making sure that those happen? Now, how often do you do monitoring? You can see here that it mirrors the number of calls that you do with coaching. So over here with coaching, if you're going to do 3 calls every 2 weeks, then you'd want to do 3 calls every 2 weeks for monitoring. And again, every 2 weeks. So stop and think about monitoring for just a little bit, because with monitoring, it's really important for them to know that they've monitored. It's important that you've monitored them. It's important for them to get feedback. So within the next 24 to 48 hours of you monitoring a call, it's great for you to give them feedback. And it can be in a more casual way, not maybe as formal as the coaching, because what happens is this. When you're doing coaching, you are talking to them about what went well on the call, and you're asking them, I'll say that one more time, you're asking them, the representative, where would you like to improve? What would you like to focus on the next time that you take a call? And they'll talk about whatever seems to be not sufficient to them, and let that be their choice, because then that's where they really have buy-in. So let's say they say, boy, the closing of my calls, I'm not quite as powerful and purposeful as I need to be. So I'm going to focus on the closing, the wrap up of my calls. And great, fantastic. So when you're monitoring them, you want to listen for what they said they wanted to improve. So when you give them feedback, you can simply give them feedback on, hey, I monitored some calls and I heard your wrap up and it's very purposeful. You've done this and this. So again, being specific, but it can be more casual. So it's all about feedback. It's visibly supporting them. It's encouraging them. Again, it's focusing on things that are important. You focus where, and then they'll focus. You inspect and they'll respect that. All right, now breathe for a little bit because let me show you the next slide. Let's say if you're in a time crunch, what gives? What do you do? Because you know it's important to coach and to monitor. Here we go. Frequency wins over duration. So let's say that you don't have a half an hour in order to do coaching. You still want to commit to that every 2 weeks. Maybe it's 15 minutes. Maybe it's 10 minutes one time and 20 minutes another time. So that frequency, making sure that they see you visibly supporting them, encouraging them, and coaching them on their development, that's enormous. And it's much more important than the duration. All right. So there's one tip for you regarding help making this work. Another tip, use the self approach. So let's say that you personally can't do the coaching, but why don't you ask them to help coach themselves? So for example, let's say that the person I'm coaching says the wrap up is something, the close of the call is something I want to work on. Then ask them, hey, for the next day, listen to your own calls and give me some feedback on how you think those went. And ask them to send you an email, ask them to write you a note, ask them to stop by your office, and just give you some feedback on how they think that they're doing. Now, another thing is ask them to record what they think is their best call. And then say, hey, Lisa, this is my best call for the day. That wrap up was fantastic. Tell me what you think. Have them send you a call that they've recorded. Or have them, with the monitoring calls, have them listen to a recorded call and give you feedback on how they think that they did. So leverage themselves. Remember, self-discovery is huge, and that'll help you in time crunch times. Now, there's also the peer approach. With the peer approach, you have maybe a senior representative that has great influence and people are receptive to them. Have the senior representative do some coaching, some side by side. That works great. You can also have people in a team meeting talk about a particular task. Let's say that there's a process that you want to make sure everyone is doing the same way. It might be a technical process, it might be a non technical standard like the greeting, and have a conversation in the meeting and make sure that you're calibrating and everyone's talking about it and understanding it the same way. So those are some ideas that you can creatively make sure that you get in coaching and or monitoring. Remember, we say let's do both. Now, in the time crunch, you've got to choose between coaching or monitoring. Coaching wins. It's that visible support. All right, so we are at about 5 minutes and till time to wrap up. So let's talk about a couple of do's and don'ts, and then we'll get some things wrapped up. So with some do's, we strongly encourage you invest that time in coaching. And we can talk more about that with any kind of questions that you have. Now, also, when you're talking about your standards, weigh them all equally. And this might be hard for you to hear a little bit. Your paradigm may be, hey, that accurate information needs to be weighted heavily. But there are a variety of calls that we've heard that are escalated that have nothing to do with inaccurate information. So when you're looking at those standards, they all get 1 point. That's what we've seen as a very, very best practice because they'll focus where you focus. Coach and monitor everyone the same. There are some organizations that say, hey, senior reps or people that have been here X amount of time, we'll monitor you once a month, everybody else gets twice a month, and really treat everyone equally. You want to make sure that everyone has the same expectations and are held to the same standards. Setting those expectations, holding them all equally accountable, really, really goes well for morale and culture. Some don'ts. Don't overwhelm with feedback. Don't do the old fire hose. Okay, here are all the things that you did incorrectly, or here are all the things you really want to do something where it's more specific and work on it. It's a long-term process. So don't overwhelm with lots and lots of feedback. Change your rep environment when listening to live calls. Don't do this. If you think about where the representative is most comfortable, it's going to be at their desk. So when you're coaching them and you're plugged into the phone, go to their desk. They're going to be more comfortable there. And here's that big thing about how are you personally wired? Are you wired more to tell? Are you wired more to ask? And when it comes to coaching, remember asking wins. Engage in that conversation. So, what we would like to share with you as we're wrapping up the conversation here, there are 3 things that we'd like to share with you. One is first, some of us may not really recognize how we're wired. And so there's something called a DISC assessment. And if this is something that you're not familiar with, this is something we've worked with for a couple of decades now and literally worked with thousands of people all over the country. And it's basically assessment that says, hey, how do I tend to be? Do I tend to talk more, listen more? Am I more fast paced or am I more reserved paced? And then what does that mean when I'm coaching someone, when I'm having interaction? How do I help people be more receptive and cooperative? So that's something we want to offer to you. If you are interested in a DISC assessment, and we'll debrief it for you also, just send an email to info@phonepro.com and we'll be happy to get that out to you. Because it has a lot to do with ensuring quality in a call. Because as leaders, you're interacting with the people, you're the ones that are coaching them and really, really being their supporter. Now, this next thing is the slides that we went through. We'll make sure that everyone gets a copy of these slides. Absolutely. We'll get those out to you. Monica and Jennifer will get those out to you. And there's something else that we have for you, a quality service assessment. Remember, one of the first things we talked about was think about yourself, think about your organization, and these best practices that we've talked about, how do they show up in your organization? Well, here's a sampling of that quality assessment. There are actually 10 best practices that are listed, and I've just grabbed the first couple of them. And so what we suggest that you do is in your organization, talk to the leaders about doing this assessment and then have a conversation about it. And then this can really lead into what do we need to start or stop or continue doing in our organization. All right. So any questions that you have, feel free to jump into the chat window. We've got about a minute at this point. And any questions that we don't answer right now, we'll definitely get back to you. We'll send that out in the emails. So any particular questions right now for us? It's like we've got a couple of people typing. Let's see what pops up. How can you reduce the negative stigma of recorded calls? So when you say the negative stigma, you're talking about, okay, we're going to sneak around and record you. One of the best things to do is to have the rep listen to the recorded call with you, and you guys um, give feedback on that call together. So it's very much out in the open, even though it's a recorded call, but that you're working in partnership to actually calibrate the understanding of how that call goes. So that's one of the best things that has worked wonderfully, that you're doing it together. Another one, we have a survey. How do you know you're asking the right questions? So when you're talking about a survey, Terry, or excuse me, Tim, are you talking about a client satisfaction survey, or are you talking about, give me a little bit more information on that. And just some basic things about surveys is make sure you have like a focus group. Think about whoever the survey is going out to. So if you're doing a client satisfaction survey, put your client hat on and how would a client potentially answer this question, and see if you're getting at the answers that you want. And yes, client satisfaction survey. It's best to test it, really best to test it. Even if you have some customers that you can go to beforehand and ask them about quality. How do you feel about how you're being treated on the phone? And give them some parameters and slot in your standards in there. So you're getting some really concrete things. How are you greeted on the phone? How does it make you feel? So hopefully that helps. And Tim, if it doesn't, just reach out to us because we'll be happy to help more. Do you have any information on strategic direction for future customer service in 2017? Well, one of the things that we do know about customer service is the power of what it brings to organizations. So when you're talking about strategic direction, does that mean having so to speak, a seat at the table of having prominence in an organization? It's very culture. There's Remember, customer service is not just external customers, but it's also internal customers. And there's a variety of information and things around, oh gosh, look up Zappos or Google or all sorts of things regarding internal customer satisfaction too. So we have, Karen, I don't know if that's helped you a little bit regarding your question on strategic direction. Looks like we might have one more coming in. Perfect. Thanks, Karen. Super. All right. So we are at our half hour. And let me go ahead and just close with this. We want to have a very purposeful close, just like we do to all of our calls. So 73% of our customers choose employees who are friendly over prices that are high, or excuse me, when prices are high, over rude when prices are low. So friendly really does matter. It's defining how that looks in your organization, because 73, you want to make sure you leverage 73% in your organization. So absolutely. Okay, looks like no more questions have come in. So we completely appreciate the opportunity to have some time with you. Any other questions that you have, you've got info@phonepro.com, and we look forward to seeing you on our next webinar. Have a great, great afternoon, everyone. You're welcome. You're welcome, Denise. Thanks, Karen. You're welcome, Tammy. Thanks for being here, Bridget.